how's it going? Today I'm going to take you guys along as I make corned beef. Or I'm going to take a big old brisket. This big old 16 pounds of brisket. I'm going to mix up the pickling spice, the pink salt. I'm going to warm that up and then add it to my beef, and then I'm going to let it cure or marinate for about a week. And then what I'm going to do from there is I'm going to can it all up so that, you know, in the winter time or when our cabbage is ready out of the garden, all I need to do is open up that jar and I've got corned beef. So come on along and watch and see how we prepare homemade corned beef. Alright, so we mixed up the pickling spice, and so what it says to do is to take our pickling spice, bring it over to the pan, and let's just toast that up just a little bit. And what that does is it really brings out the flavor and the aroma of those spices. There's our last tablespoon. All I'm going to do is kind of just work this around. You'll be able to smell it when it's starting to get ready. And it's going to go quick, so you don't want to, you know, kind of put this in here and then walk away. You guys, the smell is absolutely amazing. So as these are cooling off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out my brown sugar, some cinnamon sticks, the bay leaves, the ground ginger, and set that aside. And then once the spices cool off, I'll do like a little rough kind of a crush on those. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out the curing salt. This is the pink curing salt. Now this is not the same thing as the pink Himalayan salt. This is actually it does have the sodium nitrates in there. This is optional. I've tried doing it both ways. I still prefer using this. If you don't use this in the mix, what will happen is your meat just won't have that real pretty pink color to it. So again, this is optional, but like I said, I've done it both ways, and I prefer using this. I feel like the meat, it just has a little bit different taste and texture to it, and then it also does have that classic corned beef, you know, pinkish color to it. The recipe that I'm using calls for some brown sugar. For the total recipe, I'm going to need 1.5 cups. So I went to my pantry and I only have a cup made up. So what I did is I added about 1/2 cup of white sugar to it. And then I'm just going to take a little dollop of maple syrup or molasses. About that much. And just stir it. That's it. And that's how you make homemade brown sugar. I never buy brown sugar anymore. I just make it up kind of like as I need it. If you want a light brown sugar, you just add less. If you want a darker brown sugar, of course you add more. And like if I'm making chocolate chip cookies, I don't even mix up the brown sugar. I'll just put the sugar in there and then I'll add a little squirt of molasses. It turns out completely fine. There you go, brown sugar. So the spices are all done. Just going to go through here and kind of crush up the spices. you got a rolling pin, you can use that. Use an old jar. Let's get added in. There's pickling spice. Brown sugar. Kosher salt. Pink salt. This is the extra salt, the bay leaves, and the cinnamon sticks. I'm gonna mix this around. We're gonna let this kind of simmer for about 5 good minutes and then let it cool before I add it to my meat. What I'm going to do here is just open up the package of brisket. And I do it on this tray just so that it catches the extra blood and I don't have to take the, chance of the blood getting on everything. Kind of do a look over on this. It doesn't look like there's too much fat on here. So I'm just going to use it as is. And because I do know that I'm going to be canning this, I don't have to be careful about my cuts or making this look too pretty. That looks like a pretty good sized chunk right there. So our brine is ready. We're just going to scoop it into the buckets now. And then into the fridge for a week. About a week ago, we had purchased I think it's a 16-pound brisket from our local grocery store. And I thought, you know what? I really would love to have some corned beef put up for the wintertime. So I looked up the recipe that I had, gathered all my spices that I needed, got my buckets cleaned out, got everything, the brine boiled all up, got that cooled, put the brisket in there, put it downstairs into my spare kitchen refrigerator, and I've let it sit for, I think it was 7 days ago, and it's ready for me to use it. Now I could take and throw it into the smoker, I could throw it into the oven and do a corned beef dinner, but I really love quick dinners, especially like in the wintertime or when it's really hot outside, and I just want a good nutritious meal for my family. When you can up the corned beef, you literally have to, just because it's been cooking in the jar for so long, all you have to do is open it and heat it. It's super tender. You don't have to worry about hours and hours of slow cooking it to get it to pull apart real nice. Your house isn't heated up. So it's just one thing that we really enjoy about canned meat, especially corned beef. So let's get our jars cleaned up. We're going to wash our jars, get them set aside. I'm going to get the pressure canner going, and then I'm going to step you guys through what I do once I have the corned beef. It's been brined in the refrigerator and it's ready to go. I'm going to show you how I pack my jars and really how simple it is to use a pressure canner. All right, so come on along and see how we do. Since I'm doing just one load of corned beef today, I'm just going to hand wash the seven quarts. And I do a little quick rinse wash of the lids and the rings. So as I'm washing these dishes, I've got down in there really good, into the bottom really well. One of the things that I always do is I run my finger along the edge of the jar here. And what I'm looking for are any dips or sharp pieces that are going to stop my lid from forming a good seal on this edge. I generally try to catch them before I spend the time to wash them and clean them, but this is just one thing that I do to make sure, again, I want good seals. You know, I'm preserving this food, and I want to take all the precautions necessary so I don't have a failed jar. You know, there's nothing worse than, you know, especially when you're doing meat, the more expensive stuff, to process it and then stick it down into the pantry and then go down there and you're craving, you know, a pastrami sandwich or a roast beef sandwich, whatever, and you go down there and you have a jar that's failed. Most of the time when jars fail, it's user error. The rings weren't, or the lids weren't wiped down. It's usually really simple things. So if I'm going to take the time to do all this, I'm going to take all the steps that I can to make sure that I have a successful batch of food that comes out of there. Alright, so here's my corned beef after it has set. Look at that. So I'm just going to drain off. What I'm going to want to do right now is get these into smaller pieces, you know, that I can fit into the jar. Because this meat's cold, it's really easy to pull that extra fat off of there. That, you guys. So now that we've got all the jars filled, we're going to take just a little bit of vinegar on a clean cloth, and I'm going to make sure I hit the rims of these really well. I'm going to make sure that there's absolutely no grease or any kind of seasoning or anything on here that's going to make your seal, or, you know, like lift in a spot, and then you put it in your cupboard and then you just won't have a good seal on there. So it's really important to make sure that these are as clean as absolutely possible. You just take your lids, put them on, and then you take your bands, you put them on, you kind of zing them on, and then I just finger tight. I see just a little bit of rust on this ring, so I'll take this off and just get one that does not have the rust on there. A little bit of rust on there is probably okay. I don't leave mine on when I store them, but I don't want to take a chance of any rust getting into the food. Let's take our jars over to the pot. So we have 6 jars in here, and I need 7 to fill it. So what I did is I'm going to fill just 1 jar to fill in the center. And then I'm actually going to store this on my canning shelf as sterilized water. So if something happens, we've got a cut, one of the animals have something I need to work on, I can use this as sterile water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my lid on here. I'm going to line up my little line here with the arrow here. So you turn it and just lock all of these in. And when I do these, I go one here and then I cross over to make sure that it's even. This one on here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my vent. I'm going to turn my stove on to medium high. I'm going to wait until this steam comes out for a good 10 minutes. Once that happens, I'll flip this lever down. The pressure canner will start building pressure when it gets up to 11 pounds. So it's 11 pounds for my altitude. I'll adjust my heat back here to just to like medium low. And I'm going to watch it. I'm going to watch my pressure and make sure it doesn't go too far one way or too far the other way. On this kind, you don't hear any kind of a jiggle. So you really have to stay close and kind of watch this. I don't go downstairs and do laundry or nothing like that. Alright, so this guy has been going now for 10 good minutes. We're going to flip it down. This will slowly come up. And when it does, I'm going to back this temperature down just a little bit so that I can kind of hold at 11 pounds pressure. And I'll do that for 90 minutes. Alright, so we're at our 11 pounds. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to kick this down just a little bit. I'm going to give it, this is called a pressure canner. I'm going to give it about 5 minutes, and as long as this doesn't jiggle too much or just doesn't go down too much, I'll start my time. So our hour and a half is up. So I'm going to take this to off, and I'm just going to let it slowly cool off. Alright, so we've been sitting here for a while, cooling off. Let's unhook all these. Still bubbling in there pretty good. So I'm not in a big hurry to open these up. So we'll look again in the morning and see how everything looks. Look at that, you guys. We'll have to take and clean those jars up. But this is literally ready to open, heat it up, and it is tender, makes amazing corned beef hash. We've completed the processing of the brisket, turned that into corned beef. We then cut everything up, packed it into jars, and I pressure canned it. Now what that does is that allows me freedom down the road. One of these canner loads, I can generally get 10 to 15 meals out of that for my husband and I. Again, it's going to depend on how I use it and what I use it for. But even if I go on the conservative side and I say 10 meals, I had one mess of canning. You know, the meat did take a little bit of a mess. I did have some cleaning up to do with it, but really it was not bad. I kind of do things in shifts. When I get a minute, I'll wash my jars, I'll get things prepped, I'll have the canner ready. So then when I'm ready to rock and roll, when that meat's ready, I'm set up and I'm ready to go. Basically, I have to sit here and just kind of babysit the stove to make sure that my dial doesn't go wacky on me. I've got this stove pretty much like once I vent it and I get it set, I pretty much know the sweet spot to this stove. So generally I'll try to do it on a day where when the grandbaby goes down for a nap, I'll have the stove ready to go. When he goes down, bam, I'm ready to rock and roll. Once it's done, it's 90 minutes, I turn the stove off, I kind of pull it off the burner, and then what I do is I just let it cool off on its own time, and then I'll get to the jars the next morning or whatever. Whenever I have a minute to do the wipe off with vinegar, that's it. And then from there, I put it down into my pantry. Guys, I'm telling you, come winter time, I can open up a can of that corned beef, steam some cabbage and some new potatoes that we've squirreled away down into the pantry. Let me tell you what, it is heaven. And there's virtually no mess. So guys, I encourage you to give canning a try. And if you're afraid of the pressure canner, let me know. I would be happy to step you through how to do it. These things now are set up. They're really, I can't say foolproof, but it's not hard. And it saves a ton of money. You're making your own stuff. It's really worth it. And to be able to go down in our pantry and know that our peaches, our pickles, beans, you know, all the things that we're growing here, you know, on our little homestead, 5 acres, and the amount of stuff that you can produce here is amazing. Now, some of the meats and that kind of stuff, we do have to go and purchase those, or I do a lot of bartering. So, you know, even if you find meat on sale, go ahead and preserve it for the winter time. Prices are only going up. All right, so if you guys have any other questions, feel free to drop them below or send us a message. We'd be happy to answer your questions if we know the answers. All right, so until next time, bye-bye.